There's gonna be a take in this video that I just know people are gonna be upset about. A couple weeks ago, I made a video about the albums that I would call 10 out of 10s, you know, perfect albums. And I think the coolest thing about that video was everyone posting their own 10 out of 10s in the comment section. So because that video did so well, and I'm a view-hungry fucker, I decided to pick 6 albums from your guys' 10 out of 10s list that I have never listened to before, and I'm going to talk about them today. If I didn't pick your album, don't worry guys. I'm a content machine. You know this about me, okay? We can do a part 2, part 3, part 4. Who knows? Maybe this can turn into a thing. We can make this a thing. We'll start off with Hounds of Love by Kate Bush. This album took me by surprise. Of course, this album blew up in the past year, I think, because of that Stranger Things show. I didn't watch Stranger Things, at least that season, so I didn't even really know the song Running Up the Hill. I knew nothing about this album. I think that was a good way to go into it because I was just utterly shocked by how incredible this album is. This album came out in the 80s, I think 86. The fact that this album came out like almost 40 years ago, it boggles my mind because it sounds so fresh and so... It sounds like way ahead of its time. I can't imagine listening to this thing in the 80s, like, because I would be so mind blown. I was mind blown today. This is like a art pop type album, and there's just so many great grooves on this thing. Literally from front to back, this album is great. The pacing is incredible. There's a great mix of like upbeat pop songs and then like slower, moody songs. Cloud Bursting has got to be my favorite track on this album, I'm gonna be honest, along with like others like Waking the Witch. Waking the Witch was mind-blowing, okay? I don't know if they like recorded their own voice samples or they found voice samples for the intro of that track. That track is insane. And then like the switch up that happens in that track, oh man, it is mind-blowing to say the least. Mother Stands for Comfort is also another highlight on this thing. Jig for Life, bro, that song gets me pumping. That song gets me pumping. I don't know what I mean by that, but I mean, it gets me pumping for sure. Hounds of Love was suggested by Nelk the Gypsy. So Nelk the Gypsy, if you're watching this, thank you for that suggestion. Okay, we're going to talk about Windswept Adon by Ichiku Aoba. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I'm definitely mispronouncing that. This was suggested by user dash a bunch of random letters. I don't know what region or country this album comes from. I probably should have looked it up. This is not an album that I can see myself listening to a whole lot, but it definitely does sound really cool. I really enjoyed the energy in this album. It kind of reminded me of like a soundtrack to like a MMORPG fantasy type game. It felt very fantasy-ish. It's like this folk album, but there's a lot of great like flutes and strings and just a bunch of elements in this album that makes it sound like you're playing like a fantasy video game. And of course I can't understand the lyrics, so I just kind of focused a lot on the music, and the music sounded great. This is an album that like I could like play in the back of a car in my headphones, or like on an airplane in my headphones, and I could fall asleep to it. It would be the best sleep of my life, genuinely. This is such a smooth and sweet album. It's so just soft and quiet. Honestly, I might have some good dreams if I fall asleep to this album. I might honestly have the best dreams of my life. Yeah, this is a great album. I don't know if I'll listen to it that often, but it was definitely an enjoyable experience. Is This It by The Strokes. What, dude? You haven't listened to Is This It, man? Aren't you like a mega Carsey Edris fan, bro? Like you should like you would love The Strokes. Yeah, no, I've never listened to Is This It from front to back. Of course, I've heard like the highlights. Like I've heard like the title track, and I've heard like Last Night, obviously. But there's a lot of hidden gems in this album. Soma is a good track. I know Soma was like a hit, but I haven't listened to that one yet. That's a good album. That's a good song. This album is very easy to get through. It's like very short, 33 minutes. Every single song kind of sounds similar, but I mean, it's just like that garage post-punk revival type beat. I never got like the Strokes comparison to Carsey Headrest until I listened to this album. Like there was a moment when I was listening to this album for the first time and I was like, okay, I hear it now. This album is a straight up vibe, dude. The first time I was listening to this thing, I'm so glad I was home alone because I was just dancing my ass off, listening to this thing in my headphones, just grooving and moving. I was up on my feet. And if my roommates were home, they'd be like, dude, what are you doing? And I'd just be like, you wouldn't get it. And I'd play the music and I would just keep dancing. They wouldn't have anything else to say because that's what it's like to live with people that you've known for half your life. That was a weird anecdote. It's really hard to stay still when you're listening to this thing. It's just fun vibes all around. I actually kind of want to get into the Strokes now because of this album. That was suggested by Foresight 583. Foresight, more sight. The clock on the wall reads 1:15 midnight. Oh! Oh, let's talk about Pink Moon by Nick Drake. This is one of those albums that I've always heard about, especially getting more and more into the music communities on the internet. You know, this album is really good. It's just a sweet, smooth album. It's just an acoustic folk album. It's very stripped back, just some acoustic guitars and some vocals. I think Nick Drake's vocal style sounds really unique. He has a really unique voice, and I think it fits his guitar playing really well on this album. And like the acoustic, honestly, the guitar playing is really great. I actually am very impressed by the guitar playing on this record. I did read a review about this album though that kind of tainted my view of it, where this guy said this album just kind of sounds like some dude on the street toying around with a guitar. But even in that like scenario, like I would still throw the guy $5 if I was listening to this on the street. Like it's a good album. It's really good. A lot of people say that like this album is has kind of a melancholic vibe to it, and I kind of do agree at some points. But honestly, the guitars kind of feel very lively to me. Like it's somber, but it's like not like too somber. Like this is something that I could play as I'm cooking breakfast on a Sunday morning and I'd be very happy about it. But there are songs that are kind of crazy, like kind of down in the dumps, you know, like Parasite. It's kind of a sad song. But yeah, this is a good album. This was requested by Aiden Wilkinson 5193 and Trevor Urick 95356. So thank you guys for suggesting this album. Midori. I'm not going to try to pronounce the album title, but it's a Midori album. This shows up on like a lot of like people's topsters. I feel like I've seen it on a lot of topsters. This was requested by Pug I Guess 6548, and he described it as like a Japanese art punk, jazz punk type beat, which sounded very intriguing to me. And when I looked it up, and then I was like, oh, this album. First off, this album has one of the biggest jump scares in musical history, dude. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't listened to the album, but just know that the first track does not sound like the rest of the album at all, because the rest of this album is fucking crazy. It is so insane. Like, I cannot get enough of this thing. I did not like it at first, but now I love it. Like, this is the album that I've listened to the most out of these 6 albums that I'm talking about in this video. It's just insane. It is so mind-boggling good. Like, it is this, like I said, is Japanese art punk, jazz punk thing. So we got these loud, noisy guitars that are super just like distorted and crunchy. Then you have this jazzy piano playing throughout all the tracks. You got these insane drums that are just playing super fast. And then you got this vocalist who is screaming in Japanese, and I don't understand Japanese, but I feel offended by the things that she's saying. It's one of these things that, like, on paper and in theory, I don't feel like this should work, but they execute it so well that, like, it just sounds so fucking insane. Like, I know I keep saying insane, but that's really just the only way I could describe this album, is insane. It's 27 minutes long, so like it's very quick. It does not feel like it's 27 minutes long. It feels shorter than that, honestly. It's so easy to get through. This is the album that I'd recommend out of the 6, honestly. It's not for everybody. Like, if my mom listened to this, she would hate this thing. This would be the closest to 10 out of 10 in my opinion out of the 6 albums on this list. All right, now the moment you guys have probably been waiting for. You saw it in the thumbnail. I said at the beginning that there's a take in this video that no one's gonna like. We're gonna talk about Blonde by Frank Ocean. This was suggested by Eddie199. I don't think I said that right. I've listened to this thing multiple times. I don't get it. I don't get it. I'm sorry. The thing is, right, this album is so universally praised everywhere. It's not just in like the mainstream music that praises this album. It is in all circles. This thing is praised. It is universally known as one of the best albums of the 2010s, up there with To Pimp a Butterfly. Why? It's not a bad album. I just don't understand why it's so hyped. There's a couple reasons why I might not enjoy this as much as like I should have. Like, maybe the hype has to do with it. Maybe I'm not a big fan of like this alternative R&B type style. Maybe the timing of the album when it came out has to do with the reason why this album's so praised. I don't think the instrumentals are that interesting. There's really nothing too crazy going on in this album like that can keep my attention for an hour. That's the thing too, the album is so long. There's so many tracks that could have been cut. Because it's so long and because a lot of the instrumentals are just so bland to me, it just comes across as super boring. And also, I don't think Frank Ocean is saying anything that interesting in this album, in my opinion. I think it's kind of funny that one of my favorite tracks off this album doesn't even have Frank Ocean in it at all. Solo Reprise. I'm not saying that it's a bad album. I just don't understand the hype. And I can't get through it. I can't listen to it again. I can't listen. It's too damn long. too damn long and too damn boring for me. I can't listen to it again, okay, guys? I was listening to it yesterday, and dude, by the time I got to like the second half of the album, I was like, Jesus Christ, there's still so much left. I'm kind of bagging on this thing a little too much probably, but just because of the fact that it's just so freaking hyped, and I don't get it, man. I really don't get it. There's a few good tracks on this thing, like Nights is good, Solo Reprise is good. There's a few good tracks on this thing. I just don't understand why people say, "Oh, this album changed my life." But I mean, who am I to judge? You know, like, because anyone who puts like Blonde as a 10 out of 10 would probably look at my 10 out of 10s and be like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? I mean, the album's not bad. It's just hard for me to sit through because it's so long. I feel like a lot of tracks could have been cut. I also hope you guys try to help me understand why this album is so universally praised. Because I just want to know. I'm a curious cat. And Frank, if you're watching this, I'm sorry, man, but you deserve it after what you did at Coachella. Honestly, guys, the best thing Frank has ever done is drop out at Coachella weekend 2, so that way Skrillex, Fredigan, and Forte can perform there. Because that was a crazy set. That was a crazy set. If I didn't talk about one of your 10 out of 10s, then go ahead and comment it in this video. We can do another one of these if you guys like this video. This was fun. And I got some great music out of it. So yeah, see ya.